Istanbul is currently one of the biggest cities in the world and the most populated city in Europe with more than 15 million people living there. It's one of the most important global transportation hubs that connects Europe, Asia, the Middle East and Africa. At least 45 million people move throughout Istanbul airports every year with a maximum capacity of up to 200 million. Some of these people use the city as a stopover, while others fly here to Istanbul as their final destination for a vacation. This keeps the city busy and full of people at all times of the year. It's actually the third most popular tourist destination in Europe. At least 40% of all visits to Turkey are to the city of Istanbul. The rich cultural and historical heritage and the many tourist attractions make it a desirable destination for every traveler. Located on two continents at the same time, it's a more than 1,000-year-old mix of Roman, Byzantine and Ottoman cultures. This includes old mosques and modern skyscrapers, grand palaces and poor ghettos, incompatible things merged into a single piece. And this is what makes the city so unique. Hey there, my name is Daniel. Today's video is about the city of Istanbul. As always, in the beginning I would like to go over some basics. Istanbul is an extremely large city and you have to pick your apartment's location right. I believe it greatly depends on how many days you are planning to spend here. There are three main districts that are popular among tourists. The first one is Fatih, which is the old town. It's located on the European side. The second one is called Beyoglu, that's also on the European side. And the third one is Kadikoy, which is located in Asia. I never recommend staying overnight in Fatih, so we pick only out of two. If you're very short on time, the most preferable option would be Beyoglu. The best spot is near Galata Tower. But if you have some time in your schedule, then a better option would be to stay on the Asian side. Later in the video I will cover why. Istanbul is a pretty safe city, but you still should know some rules. There are lots of scammers, and especially if you are traveling alone, you should watch your belongings carefully. We are going to start the exploration of the city from the Beyoglu district and the heart of it, which is the Taxim Square. The Taxim Square is probably one of the two most popular start-off points for people who travel to Istanbul. And signs on the stores and cafes written in different languages gives an idea of the great diversity of people coming here from all around the world to see Istanbul. It's an important transport hub, and here you will find bus stops, the metro, the underground funicular that goes directly to the Bosphorus Strait, and the famous old red tram that goes through Istiklal Street to the Galata Tower. I lived here for about a week, and this district definitely has its own unique atmosphere. It even has its own inexpressible sound, which is a mix of the body loud engine sounds, taxi horns, and the yelling of street vendors that circle through the neighborhood offering their goods. It's a very busy and noisy place, but you really get used to it and even miss it after you leave. It's full of cafes, some of them are true authentic Turkish places and others are very European and modern. You will also find Turkish baths, art galleries and museums. Many streets are covered with graffiti, and all of this combined makes this neighborhood so attractive to tourists. Istiklal Street is definitely the most famous street in Istanbul and one of the most popular attractions. It's a very long pedestrian street with hundreds of clothing shops, shops with Turkish sweets, restaurants, hotels, hookah bars and other interesting looking places like old churches or embassies of different countries. It starts from the Taxim Square and goes to the Galata Tower, and the walk takes about 20 minutes. It's a pedestrian street with one exclusion. From 1871 until modern days, the red retro-looking tram circles back and forth on the street. It starts from the tunnel funicular station, which is, by the way, is one of the oldest in Europe and helps people to get to the Taxim Square. At the other end of the Istiklal is another big important site. It's the Galata Tower. Along with the red tram, Galata Tower is one of major symbols of the Beyoglu district and Istanbul as a whole. It has been on a map in different forms and shapes since the 6th century, starting as a wooden tower and then being converted to a stone one. Nowadays, it serves as a museum with an observation deck with a 360-degree view over Istanbul, but centuries ago it was a lighthouse, an observatory, a fire alarm tower and a prison. It might not look that high when you stand at the foot of it, but when you get to the top of it, the views that you get to see are simply mind-blowing. Istanbul is famous for offering nice views from the terraces on the rooftops of cafes that can practically replace the Galata Tower if you don't feel like standing and waiting in a long line. I would say that all of the Beyoglu is completely safe to explore even at night. One thing that you should remember is that on the right side of the Taxim is the ghetto, and you are better off avoiding that area. There's a two-lane road that you shouldn't cross. What you should do, however, is keep moving toward the Fatih district, which I think is a very good plan for touring Istanbul. And if you do that, eventually you will find yourself in the Karakoy district. Karakoy, as well as Taxim, is a very important transport hub, but unlike the latter, it has a seaport that will allow you to travel across the Golden Horn, Bosphorus Strait, along the coast to other places in Istanbul, and of course to the Prince Islands, which we are going to check out a bit later. So, if your stay in Istanbul is going to last at least 4 or 5 days, you will be visiting Karakoy very often. It has a tram and bus station that can help you get to top attractions faster, and also there's a funicular station that's called the Tunnel. Karakoy is a trendy place with lots of graffiti on walls, youth spending time in cool cafes, bars and coffee shops, and has a very relaxed atmosphere. Here you will find many street musicians and even bands. The most memorable place is the observation terrace near the water with benches that you can use to relax and watch over the Golden Horn and the mosques on the other side of it. The Galata Bridge that connects Beyoglu and Fatih is also a pretty interesting place. Locals of all ages are using it for fishing mostly. They fish all the time, in the early morning, during the midday, in the evening, and even at night. They're fishing for mackerel that they then either sell on a fish market that's located on the right side of the bridge, or they just cook it right away with portable grills and sell to passing tourists. This bridge has 2 stories, and on the first story there are many cafes and fish restaurants with exciting views. I spent a few hours just sitting there and relaxing. It was a very cool feeling. As soon as you cross the bridge, you will find yourself in the Fatih district. That's where most of Istanbul top attractions are located. It's hard to believe, but there are lots of people who visit Istanbul and only see this part of the city. There are lots of things to discover here, but believe me, you will need only 2 days at maximum to explore. Anyway, let's keep rolling and see what this place has for us. Fatih district is the area where the history of modern Istanbul began. It used to be called Constantinople for almost 1700 years, and only in 1930 was the name changed to Istanbul. When you approach Fatih from the Galata Bridge, the first thing you will see is the Egyptian Bazaar. Along with the Grand Bazaar, which is located a bit further in the district, they both are an important part of the local color. There is also a park that's called Gulhane Park, but I wouldn't suggest spending much time there. Honestly, it didn't impact me as much as Yildiz Park in Besiktas that I will cover in the next part of the video. But what you should definitely check out here are the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. These 2 places are very trendy among tourists and are masterpieces of old architecture designed in Byzantine and Ottoman styles. Unfortunately, prior to construction of the Blue Mosque, everything in its territory was wiped clean, including all Byzantine buildings, palaces and the famous Hippodrome of Constantinople. Thousands of years ago, the Hippodrome was a large sort of sporting center that was used for horse races, but what's left now are several ancient obelisks that used to stay in the middle of a racing circuit. The other memorable and extraordinary site is located underneath the city just across the street and is called the Basilica Cistern. You may be also interested in visiting another handful of marvelous mosques, churches, museums, parks and interesting sites, but what impressed me was the marvelous Suleymaniye Mosque. The design of this 16th century architectural masterpiece was inspired by the exterior of the Hagia Sophia. It's built on a so-called third hill, and you will have to climb that first, but it gives such an incredible and iconic view over Istanbul that you can spend hours standing there and looking over the Golden Horn on the hills of the Beyoglu district, Galata Bridge, Bosphorus Strait, and you can also see hundreds of seagulls flying around looking for some food. There is no doubt that Fatih has seen lots of history and every detail brings you back to the old times. But there are also some drawbacks of staying in this place, and here are some of them. Today, it's one of the poorest neighborhoods in Istanbul, and you will notice this right away. There are no modern architecture at all. It's also very conservative from place to place. It kind of takes some time to get out of there to see the rest of the city, and you probably don't want to spend the time on buses and tram rides. To me, it's the dirtiest place in Istanbul. Litter is everywhere, and honestly, I was shocked by this fact. Because it attracts millions of tourists, there are lots of scammers too. Be ready to meet them even in the middle of a day. This place is very loud and super busy during the daytime, but after 10 p.m. it's dead silent. It becomes a ghost town. I remember walking all alone on the street in complete silence and being scared by cats. Anyway, it is what it is, and we can forgive Fatih for being so, as it holds one of the most famous and iconic sites of Istanbul. The Hagia Sophia is the first thing everyone wants to see when in this city. Hagia Sophia is one of the very few historical monuments which has survived until modern days and has not lost its former greatness and power. It's been called the 8th miracle of the world, and without any doubt it's the most visited attraction not only in Istanbul but in the whole of Turkey. It was built in the 6th century, and it took 5 years, 10,000 workers, and 3 years of the Byzantine Empire's budget. It has a very long and complicated history. When it was built in 530 AD, it was a Christian Orthodox church, and a few times it was ruined and reconstructed. In 1054, it was the place where Christianity was split into two waves: Orthodox with the capital in Constantinople and Catholic with the capital in Rome. 200 years later, during the Fourth Crusade, Hagia Sophia was seized, barbarously looted, and turned into a Catholic church. It was stripped of all the gold and silver to pay off the Crusaders. Some years later, it was turned back to an Orthodox place once again, and then it witnessed the downfall of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire. In 1453, it was turned into a mosque, and all the marvelous ancient mosaics were plastered and the marble floors were covered with carpets. Only in 1935 it was given a neutral status as a museum, and the mosaics were restored and given a second life. It's ironic, but it's the plastering process that has conserved the mosaics and let them survive to the present day. This monumental structure received a UNESCO World Heritage status, yet in 2020 it became a mosque once again, and many of the historic relics are covered and not available for viewing. Its monumental exterior design and incredibly beautiful and mesmerizing interior decoration with gold, silver, pearls, ivory and marble have impressed the Ottoman Sultan so much that Hagia Sophia has served as a blueprint for a building of at least 25 other mosques of Istanbul. Each one of them has some similarities with Hagia Sophia, and the most famous are the Blue Mosque and the Suleymaniye Mosque. Today, it's one of the most hallowed places of worship for Muslims, only after the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia. The mix of Islamic and Christian cultures makes this place so special, and its fantastic and authentic interior leaves its visitors speechless every single time. There are a few key points to remember when visiting this place. You have to be properly dressed up to go inside, and you must respect the rules and people who pray. Also, it's not always available for visiting, and there might be a long line of people. Check out the schedule. Usually they let tourists in after every prayer is finished. With regards to Fatih, there's actually one more place you might want to visit, but it's not so popular. Also, it's getting more and more attention in recent years. I'm talking about the Fanar and Balat districts. It's hard to tell where one starts and the other ends. They're pretty much the same looking and remind me of a labyrinth of tiny cobblestone streets with fancy homes on the sides. These two are actually considered to be the oldest districts of modern Istanbul, and they have quite an interesting history too. So let's check out the details. The first attraction that you will see while visiting this place will be the church. It's actually the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, and it's famous for being completely made of iron. It's actually one of a kind in the world because of this, and the whole structure was brought to Istanbul from Austria ownership more than 100 years ago. You won't find tremendous or level attractions here, but a calm and authentic atmosphere and quite unique and interesting look is what makes this place interesting. Now it's a very Instagrammable place with many authentic cafes, vintage shops, art galleries and attractive colorful graffiti on walls. The buildings create a special mood because many of them are painted in very bright colors, and the run-down houses that haven't been renovated yet and which stand along with the restored ones create a very interesting look. And of course, let's not forget about laundry on the lines. That's classic for such places. The most famous construction you will find here is the so-called Red School, which is actually a Greek Orthodox college. This building is really big. It's almost like a castle, and you can see it from any corner. Generally speaking, this neighborhood won't take too much of your time, maybe a few hours. But to be honest, if you have a limited time in Istanbul, I would recommend you check out this place last. There are many other cool places that are just as authentic, and I'm going to talk about them next. Before telling the story about other places in Istanbul, let's talk about the food. It's another attraction of the city and definitely deserves a dedicated part of this video. The food is super tasty, mostly cheap, and people in Turkey definitely know how to cook. The smell of different food comes from every corner in the city, distracting you from observing tourist sites. The diversity of options is simply amazing, and it's just impossible to stay hungry in this city even if you are on a budget. A special place is reserved for street food. Very often it's even tastier than in cafes and restaurants, and the quality is top level. Everything here is made of very fresh products, and street food is an important part of the diet of every local. The flashy red cars with street food are spread all over the city, and they are an essential part of the visual picture of it. They sell grilled or boiled corn, roasted chestnuts, mussels with rice and lemon, and small circular crusty bread topped with sesame that's called simit. There is a great variety of meat-based dishes, and a few of them are worth mentioning. I really enjoy Iskandar kebab. It's a very thinly sliced meat served with grilled vegetables, slices of bread at the bottom, and topped with melted oil and yogurt. It's super tasty, and I can recommend one place in the Besiktas district, which you will easily find on a map. The other dish that's popular especially among locals is called kokoreç. This is one of the most consumed street dishes, and people say that it's extremely delicious, but I didn't like the recipe and ingredients, so I passed it by. When you are in Karakoy, near the fish market or on the other side of the Galata Bridge, make sure to try a sandwich with fish. It's called balık ekmek, meaning fish in bread. You have to try it at least once. With regards to desserts, Turkey is famous for its baklava. There are dozens of different kinds of it with different fillings, just choose any that looks good to you. There are so many places to eat in Istanbul that it's honestly hard to pick one and recommend it to you. It's interesting, but the look of the place absolutely doesn't mirror the quality and tastiness of the food. You might find a place that doesn't look very nice, but you will be overwhelmed with the food they serve there. I would suggest eating only where locals eat and don't answer to the street barkers. And one last cool feature of the city, you can try fresh juices right on the street near the Galata Tower. Pineapple and pomegranate are just delicious. Okay, let's keep rolling. The next locations would be the Nishantashi and Besiktas districts, and if you remember, I said I would recommend for you a park that's much better than the one in Fatih. The name of it is Yildiz Park. All three of these places are located close to each other, so I decided to put them all in one chapter. The story begins with Nishantashi. It's an elite neighborhood with lots of boutiques of world-famous brands, stylish restaurants, cafes, nightclubs and bars. On the whole European side of Istanbul, this is the most European part. It's expressed in the clothing and behavior of the people, in the architecture and purpose of the buildings, and the overall cleanness of the streets and how they are landscaped. Built up with the classic European style of the 20th century, most of the time this neighborhood drastically differs from the rest of Istanbul. People usually visit it at night for parties, during the daytime for an expensive shopping trip, or to enjoy some coffee and baked goods. The real estate price is one of the highest here. It's the place where the richest people of Istanbul live. Nishantashi is located on a hill, and if you walk down toward the Bosphorus Strait, you will eventually arrive at the Besiktas neighborhood. Besiktas is famous for the palaces of the sultans that are scattered along the seashore, with fish markets, the Karakoy Mosque, and the Naval Museum with a nearby square and many trophy ship cannons. It's also a major transportation hub, and you will use the seaport quite often, as well as many buses that can get you to any place in Istanbul from here. It's yet another place with dozens of good cafes and restaurants where you can enjoy a meal of different cuisines. I personally came back here several times for a good meal. The crowded, loud district with bright, colorful graffiti on the walls, tattoo shops, and packed cafes with tables outside creates the cool and fun atmosphere of the place where you want to spend an evening. The Yildiz Park that I recommended earlier is located just one bus stop from the Besiktas seaport. It's a massive landscape park with scenic paths, tree-covered hills, waterfalls and gardens. It was a central part of the Ottoman Empire for some period of time, and now it's a beloved place of rest for locals. It has several long and short suspension bridges over the water, gardens and many suitable picnic areas, which all make it one of the most picturesque places for picnicking in all of Istanbul. It's not a place every visitor of Istanbul is certain to go, but if your trip isn't short and you want to explore the city in full, then the gorgeous greenery and cascading waterfalls will make a nice day for you. I remember this as a nice place where I met good people, spent some time with them, and was treated to some picnic snacks for helping them. If you ever come to Besiktas, I strongly advise you to take the walk to Yildiz Park and enjoy one of your days here. The next topic will be about the transport. The variety of transport options in Istanbul is crazy, and for every case there is something really special. The only con that I can mention would probably be everyday walking in the Beyoglu district and near the Galata Tower, as you have to climb and descend there all the time. And taking into account that typically it's pretty warm in Istanbul, this activity will definitely not be a walk in a park. Istanbul offers its visitors thousands of taxis, funiculars and trams, buses and ferries, and of course electric scooters, but I personally think that the quality of the roads doesn't fit the idea of safe traveling with them. Also, Istanbul has the longest underwater metro tunnel in the world, which crosses over the Bosphorus Strait. Anyway, let's hop into the story. As a side effect of being a popular tourist city, Istanbul is full of scammers, and a lot of scams happen when using a taxi. Despite the fact that every taxi has a taximeter, you should always keep your eyes on it. Don't let them turn it off telling you that it's broken. Watch where they drive you, as they may want to make several circles to increase the price of a trip. And always show the bills you're paying with and say what they are out loud when you're giving them cash. It's often the case that they will take your money and swap it with smaller bills and then ask you to pay what's left. I'm not saying this happens every time, but you should be cautious about this, as it happens often, and even I almost got trapped into one of these scams 2 times. But nevertheless, using a taxi saves a lot of time in Istanbul, especially while you are on the European side. And you shouldn't hesitate to call one when you need to go somewhere fast. Another cool thing that you will definitely notice while you're in the city is how pedestrians and cars and mopeds sort of exist in the same dimension. After a few days, you stop worrying about cars that drive very close to you all the time, almost hitting you but still managing to leave a few inches. Istanbul is located on two continents, so there has to be transport that helps people get across the Bosphorus Strait. And it's no surprise that there are dozens of types of water transport and big and small piers serving this need. The ferries, that are also part of the public transport system that you can access with an Istanbul card, can get you not only across the border but even up or down the shore. It was the biggest attraction for me and something that I missed very much. It is one of the things that I think about most when remembering my visit to Istanbul. Everyday trips on ferries are an essential part of visiting Istanbul, and your visit to the city simply won't be complete without it. While I was living in Karakoy, every day I crossed the Bosphorus Strait in the morning and in the evening, and every time Istanbul opened up from new angles. You can sit outside of the ferry on a bench and watch all Istanbul attractions without the need for any paid tour. The most common route is from Karakoy to Kadikoy, but there are some even better options like Besiktas Bebek that I will cover later in the video. It was a true pleasure getting a fresh coffee in the morning and waiting near the water for your boat to arrive. In the next part, I would like to share my personal experience of visiting some distant and definitely not trendy places of Istanbul. But believe me, visiting these was an essential part of the overall experience. Specifically, I'm talking about the Arnavutkoy and Bebek neighborhoods, which are located on the Bosphorus Strait shore. You will have to use a ferry to get there. This was a Sunday morning trip with friends that I met in Istanbul. We started off from the Besiktas seaport and then headed towards the first stop, which should have been Arnavutkoy. On our way there, we passed by some of the popular attractions like the magnificent 19th century Karakoy Mosque and the first Bosphorus Bridge, which together create quite an amazing picture you must see. The gigantic first Bosphorus Bridge that connected Europe and Asia some time ago was once in the top 5 longest bridges in the world, but now is below the top 30. Our initial plan was to get off the ferry in Arnavutkoy and walk along the seaside towards Bebek and then have breakfast there in one of the cool cafes with a panoramic view over the strait. But we blundered the drop-off in Arnavutkoy and had to change the plan. So then we decided to head directly towards Bebek on the ferry, have a meal there and went back to Arnavutkoy by foot while checking some of the local sites and having some coffee there before going home. I must say that these two neighborhoods are probably one of my favorites in Istanbul. They feel like an absolutely different city. Especially Bebek, which has a different charm, very similar to some of the French or Italian coastline cities. And the place we had breakfast in was simply gorgeous. It really stole my heart. Sitting on a balcony with a nice view and amazing food is priceless. After finishing the delicious meal, we headed back to Arnavutkoy by foot. I would say that the biggest and coolest part of Bebek is the long seaside that connects it with Arnavutkoy that you can walk along. Not too long ago, Bebek was just a fishing village, but now it's a prestigious neighborhood that's popular among cinematographers for nice views. When approaching Arnavutkoy, I noticed many wooden buildings in Osman style. They are a sort of attraction due to their very unique look, but unfortunately, because of past fires, there are not too many of them left. There are actually two places called Arnavutkoy. One is this, and the other one is the Greenery district of Istanbul and is located deeper into the mainland, separated with other districts. Up until the 1920s, Greeks used to live here and their community still remains. They have their own church, which is called Tahiatris, and it's the biggest landscape of this district. Also, it's the biggest Greek church in Istanbul. Rather than that, I didn't find anything else spectacular, however there might be something. Traveling down one side of the strait takes maybe 30-40 minutes and it requires aligning to the ferry schedule. The whole trip took maybe half a day, and we still had time to return on the ferry to Karakoy and check out that place too. On the way back, on the other side of the strait, there were attractions like the biggest mosque in Istanbul and the newly built futuristic TV tower, which is 390 meters tall. By the way, those two are located on a Kalmyka hill. I highly recommend visiting that place as it has one of the best panoramic views over the city. You could see it in the intro of this video. Moving further, the next on the list is Kadikoy neighborhood. After getting acquainted with the European side and all its must-see attractions, you should also look at other side of Istanbul, the Asian one. One place you should visit is called Kadikoy, and it's one of the coolest districts of Istanbul. The Asian side of Istanbul actually feels so European. To me, it's the best place to stay while you're traveling to Istanbul. Living in this neighborhood has so many benefits that it deserves another video. But if you want a short list, then here you go. It's much cleaner than the rest of Istanbul. It's very popular among youth, very stylish, has dozens of very good places to eat ranging from street foods to seafood restaurants, cafes and coffee shops. It's extremely authentic, peaceful and calm during the day and not loud but busy at night. This neighborhood on the Asian side is actually super enormous and it's one of the oldest in Istanbul. You won't be able to see it all and you for sure don't need to. But what you should be aiming for is to visit a small part of it that's called Moda. This was my second stop and I lived here for just about a week or so and was able to explore all the streets. This place is not about the attractions and you won't find many here, but it's rather about the feel and energy of this place that's kind of European, modern and stylish and not conservative at all. It has a completely different atmosphere of a calm, quiet, clean area full of friendly and wonderful people. It's getting more popular in recent times, but still loses to Fatih and Beyoglu in terms of how many tourists choose to visit. At the same time, I had a bit of a problem finding a good place to stay here. They all are either booked or expensive and not that great. I stopped on a street where locals have stores selling antique stuff, and this street is kind of an attraction here and you can add visiting it to your list. The main street with many shops where the old tram line is would be another good thing for your list. The main activity in Moda would be just walking around and relaxing, having a cup of coffee, some meals in a seafood restaurant of which there are many here, or trying great street food or visiting the seafront promenade. The promenade is the most beautiful part of Moda. It's long and wide and goes around the whole area. In the evenings, it's very crowded with locals catching sun rays and resting on the big warm stones near the seashore. From this place, you can see the other side of the Bosphorus Strait and the Fatih district. It's also a popular place for sporting activities. People use bicycles and scooters and there are basketball fields and playgrounds. However, the rest of Karakoy isn't as interesting. The biggest attraction there is Baghdad Avenue, which is the longest avenue in the city. You will have to spend some time to get to the part of it where there are decent places and stores, and I can't really say that it's worth spending so much time there. So by living in this district, you kind of fit to burst with one scone as each time you go to Taxim or Fatih, you have to travel on board, and these board rides are truly the best feature of Istanbul. You can't see Istanbul better than from a board. And now we come to the last part of the video. Every great city has its own kind of a cool getaway spot, and Istanbul is not an exception. It also has something like this, and this place is called Prince Islands, which is an official part of Istanbul. Originally, my plan was to visit Prince Islands on a warm, beautiful day, have a swim in the sea on a wild rocky beach and enjoy the sun, but that didn't really pan out. That day started with a foggy weather and a little bit of rain. But it also brought with it a beautiful sense of loneliness and a very unique and indescribable atmosphere. Despite the fact that it was the opposite of what I was expecting, it made me really happy that day. The way to Prince Islands is an amazing experience on its own and you get to see some really beautiful things, like the coast of the Karakoy, seagulls flying low above the water trying to catch some fish, Sometimes dolphins following the ferry, fishing boats passing by. Rocky islands flourished with green and colorful wooden homes located just on the edge of the shore. I had chosen to visit Bayukara Island, which translates to the Big Island. It's the last stop on the ferry route, so before getting there, you will have a chance to see most of the islands from the ferry. Since the 19th century, wealthy people started buying land and building expensive wooden mansions here. Later, after the ferry transportation between Istanbul and Adalars was established on a daily basis, this place became a popular destination for a short vacation from a noisy city or just for a one-day picnic. This place is really charming. The fresh sea air and smell of pine trees is energizing and brings calmness and peace to your soul. You can literally taste this air, and the silence does something magical to your mind. The most popular attraction would be to take a bike from the rental and have a scenic trip around the island where you can witness all of these beautiful things, lots of colorful flowers, parks with trails and benches with picturesque views over the sea. Due to the fact that for a long period of time the biggest part of the population here was Greek and Armenian, you will also find many churches and monasteries here too. But even if you are not interested in that, just a trip around the island on a bicycle and a stop at one of a dozen fish restaurants that are located just on the left from the ferry station will make it worth the visit. You will need half a day at most to complete this program, and don't forget that there are many hills on this island, so make sure you have enough stamina for this. And one more piece of advice: never return with the last ferry. A few more interesting facts about this place. There are no cars, no industrial plants, it's 100% clean. Only electric vehicles, bicycles and horses are allowed. Up until 2020 it was sort of an attraction to take a ride on a horse carriage, but that's banned now too. Also, there is the biggest wooden building in Europe located on Bayokata. It was supposed to be a casino, but later was given to children and served as orphanage. Today it's closed and abandoned, and you will not be able to get inside or even on site. Besides all the sites from this video, there are some that I missed checking out. Among those are the Miniaturk, which is an open-air museum of all Turkey's attractions recreated in a smaller size. The Rumeli Hisari Fortress that's located in Bebek near the second Bosphorus Bridge, and the views from the roof of the Sapphire skyscraper that's also a popular attraction. Anyway, that was my story of Istanbul. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop a comment down below the video for the algorithm and let me know what you think. See you next time.